They looked me in the eye and told me to be independent. That meant they would not pay 1 cent for my college, but my sister got whatever she wanted. 9 years later, I walked into a wedding so lavish it shined like a varnished lie. My mother smirked, loud enough for strangers to hear, saying I had finally crawled back like a past-due invoice. Before I could even breathe, the groom went pale and demanded everyone stop immediately. My name is Mavisa Moonhall, and I am 34 years old. That is the only thing I own in this room that has not been appraised, insured, or leveraged for social capital. Everything else in this ballroom at the Red Rock Sanctuary Resort in Sedona is a prop. The imported orchids cascading down the walls cost more than my first 2 cars combined. The heavy silk tablecloths feel like they were woven from pure judgment. The air conditioning is humming at a precise temperature designed to keep expensive makeup from melting, but it does nothing to cool the scorching resentment radiating from the woman standing in front of me. I did not want to be here. My husband, Connor Whitfall, is the only reason I agreed to drive 5 hours through the Arizona heat to attend the wedding of a sister who has not spoken to me in 9 years unless she needed a scapegoat. We had a strategy. It was a simple plan that Connor and I had rehearsed in the car like secret agents preparing for an extraction mission. We called it the Gray Rock Method. Be boring, be uninteresting, do not engage. Stand in the back, sip 1 glass of sparkling water, smile vaguely at anyone who asks how we know the bride, and leave before the cake is cut. We were trying to be invisible, but the problem with trying to be invisible around my family is that they need an audience, and more importantly, they need a villain. A hero shines brighter when there is a monster in the room, and the Vales have always cast me as the monster. We had barely made it past the gift table when my mother, Lenora Vale, intercepted us. She moved with the silent, predatory grace of a shark in a chiffon gown. She looked impeccable. Her skin was pulled tight. Her hair was an architectural marvel of blonde ambition, and her smile was a weapon. She did not look at me with warmth. She looked at me the way a health inspector looks at a cockroach in a Michelin star kitchen. She blocked our path to the bar, positioning herself so that a cluster of wealthy guests from the groom's side would have to stop and listen. This was calculated. Lenora never does anything without a calculation of the return on investment. "Mavisa," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that tasted like aspartame. "You actually came." She let the silence hang there for 3 seconds, just long enough for the guests nearby to turn their heads. "I honestly did not think you could afford the trip," she continued, loud enough to carry over the string quartet playing in the corner. "I told your father just this morning that we should have sent you a gas card. You know, since you are so big on being independent." There it was. The word, independent. 9 years ago. That word was a door slamming in my face. It was the reason I ate instant noodles for dinner 5 nights a week while my sister, Bristol, toured Europe on my parents' credit card. It was the reason I worked double shifts at a convenience store while Bristol took unpaid internships to build her resume. Now, in the middle of a wedding that likely cost $300,000, my mother was using that word to strip me naked. I felt Connor's hand tighten on the small of my back. His touch was grounding, a reminder that I was not that 25-year-old girl begging for tuition money anymore. I was Mavisa Moonhall. I had a career. I had a life. I had paid for my own dress, my own shoes, and the gas in our rental car. "Hello, Mother," I said, keeping my voice flat. "The resort is beautiful. You have done a wonderful job." I refused to take the bait. I refused to let her see the blood in the water. But Lenora was not finished. She turned to the couple standing next to her, a distinguished older man and woman who looked like they owned a bank, or perhaps several banks. "This is my eldest," Lenora said, gesturing to me with a limp wrist. "Mavisa decided years ago that our family support was too suffocating. She wanted to make it on her own. We respected that, of course, though it is funny how the prodigal daughter always finds her way back when there is an open bar and a free meal. She is a bit like a past-due invoice. You forget about it, and then it shows up in the mail just to ruin your credit score." The older couple laughed politely, but their eyes darted between us. sensing the toxicity. I saw the shame they felt on my behalf. It was a physical weight. Then, the crowd parted. Bristol approached. My sister looked like a princess from a fairy tale written by a marketing firm. Her dress was a cloud of white lace and crystals. She was glowing, radiant, and terrifying. She stopped beside our mother, linking her arm through Lenora's. It was a tableau of unity, the perfect mother, the perfect daughter, and me, the dark stain on the edge of the frame. Bristol looked at me, and her lips curled into a half-smile. It was not a smile of greeting. It was the smile of someone who has already won the game and is just waiting for the loser to realize it. It was a rehearsed expression. I could picture her practicing it in the mirror for weeks, adjusting the angle of her chin, perfecting the look of pity mixed with disdain. "Hi, Mavisa," Bristol said. Her voice was light, airy. "I am glad you made it. Did you find the parking okay? We reserved the valet for the VIP guests, so I was worried you might have had to walk from the lower lot in those heels." She glanced down at my shoes. They were nice shoes. I had bought them on sale. But they were leather, and they were classic. Bristol made them look like garbage with a single glance. "We are fine. Bristol," I said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," she preened. "Dane is just over there. You haven't met him yet, have you? He is wonderful. He is obsessed with details. He vetted the entire guest list himself." She waved her hand. Summoning the groom, Dane Ketterly stepped out of the crowd. He was handsome in the way a news anchor is handsome, polished, symmetrical, and completely devoid of distinct features. He held a crystal tumbler of whiskey in one hand. He looked confident, relaxed, the master of his domain. He walked over to his bride, placing a possessive hand on her waist. "Dane, darling," Bristol cooed. "This is my sister, the one I told you about, Mavisa." Dane smiled the smile of a man who has shaken 500 hands that day and does not remember a single one of them. He extended his hand toward me. "Nice to meet you," he said, his voice smooth. "Bristol has mentioned you, the independent one, right?" He chuckled. A sound that was meant to be charming but came out condescending. He looked at Connor, then back at me, ready to move on to the next guest, ready to dismiss us as the poor relations who needed to be tolerated for the sake of appearances. "I am Connor Whitfall," my husband said, shaking Dane's hand firmly, "and this is my wife, Mavisa Moonhall." The reaction was instantaneous. It was as if someone had cut the power to a high-voltage line. The moment the name Moonhall left Connor's lips, the color drained from Dane Ketterly's face. It did not happen slowly. It happened all at once, like a shutter closing. His tan skin turned the color of ash. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of absolute, unadulterated shock. His fingers, which had been loosely holding his whiskey glass, spasmed. The crystal groaned under the pressure, and his knuckles turned bone white. He stared at me. He did not look at me like a sister-in-law. He did not look at me like a guest. He looked at me like I was a ghost, or worse. He looked at me like I was a piece of evidence. "Moonhall," Dane whispered. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, heavy and dangerous. Bristol frowned, sensing the shift in her fiancé's demeanor but not understanding it. "Yes, Dane, Moonhall. That is the name she took when she married Connor. I told you she changed it from Vale. It is stupid, I know, giving up the family name. But—" "Stop," Dane said. It was not a shout, but it was forceful enough to cut through Bristol's chatter. "What?" Bristol asked, her laugh nervous now. "I said stop," Dane said, his voice rising, gaining a hard, metallic edge. He pulled his hand away from Bristol's waist as if her dress were on fire. He took a step back, putting distance between himself and the Vale women. His eyes were locked on my face, scanning my features, searching for something. It was the look of a man trying to solve a puzzle that he thought he had finished years ago, only to realize the pieces were all wrong. The conversation in the immediate vicinity died. The silence rippled outward. People sensed the disruption. Necks craned. The air in the hallway grew thick and heavy. Dane, Lenora stepped forward, her smile faltering for the first time. Is something wrong? The photographer is waiting for the family portrait. Dane ignored her. He ignored the guests. He ignored the $50,000 worth of flowers and the view of the red rocks. He looked only at me. You are Mavissa Moonhall, he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the gravity of a judge reading a verdict. Mavissa Vale, born 1992. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why did he know my birth year? Why was he reciting my vital statistics in the middle of his wedding reception? Yes, I said slowly. That is me. Dane swallowed hard. I could see the Adam's apple bob in his throat. He looked terrified. But beneath the terror, there was something else. Calculation. He was a risk assessment officer. I knew that much about him from the invitation. He managed liabilities. And right now, he was looking at me like I was the biggest liability in the room. And you. Dane paused, his eyes darting to Bristol, then back to me. You are not estranged. You are here, physically here. I am standing right in front of you, I said. Dane let out a breath that sounded like a curse. He turned to Bristol. The look on his face was one of betrayal. Deep, stinging betrayal. You said she was gone, Dane hissed at Bristol. You told me she was gone. You told me she was out of the picture. You said she was unreachable. She is, Bristol stammered, her composure cracking. She is emotionally unavailable, Dane. That is what I meant. She abandoned us. She is... Stop. Right. Now. Dane enunciated every word, his voice dropping to a growl. Stop talking. Bristol. The hallway was dead silent now. Even the string quartet seemed to have missed a beat. The guests were staring openly. This was not the polite drama of a drunken uncle making a toast. This was the dark, ugly underbelly of a scandal breaking open in real time. My mother tried to salvage the scene. She reached for Dane's arm. Dane, sweetheart, it is just the heat. You are stressed. Let us go inside and get some water. Mavissa is just upsetting you. She has that effect on people. We can ask security to escort her out if... Dane recoiled from her touch. Do not touch me, Lenora. He looked at me again. The fear in his eyes had crystallized into clarity. She is Mavissa Moonhall, he repeated to himself, as if trying to rewrite reality. And if she is standing here, if she is alive and standing here, and if she did not sign that paper... He trailed off. But the implication hung in the air like smoke. Connor stepped forward. He moved his body slightly in front of mine, creating a shield. My husband is not a loud man. He does not yell. He does not make scenes. But he has a stillness about him that is more terrifying than any shout. He looked at Dane, then at Lenora, and finally at Bristol. My wife does not need to prove anything to you, Connor said. His voice was low, calm, and absolute. We came here to wish you well, but if you intend to drag her onto your stage for some kind of performance, be warned. We will control the lighting. Connor's words were a promise, a threat wrapped in velvet. I stood there, watching my mother and sister. For the first time in my life, I saw something in their eyes that I had never seen before. Usually, when they looked at me, I saw contempt. I saw dismissal. I saw the way they viewed me as a failure because I didn't drive a luxury car or marry a hedge fund manager. But in that moment, as Dane Ketterly stared at me with horror and Connor stood beside me with steel in his spine, I realized they were not looking at me with contempt. They were looking at me with fear. They were not afraid because I was poor. They were not afraid because I was an embarrassment. They were afraid because I was lucid. They were afraid because I was sober, stable, and standing on my own 2 feet. They were afraid because I was the only person in the world who remembered exactly what had happened in that house 10 years ago. And for some reason, my memory was suddenly dangerous to them. Dane looked at me one last time, his eyes wide, pleading. Mavissa, he said, his voice shaking. Did you sign the incorporation papers for the Vale Pathways Foundation? The question hit me like a physical blow. The what? I asked. The Vale Pathways Foundation, Dane said. The nonprofit, the family charity, the one you supposedly co-founded with Bristol 8 years ago. I stared at him. I had never heard those words in my life. I have no idea what you are talking about, I said. The blood drained from Bristol's face so completely that her makeup stood out in stark, grotesque relief. Dane closed his eyes. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute he packed was full of silverware. "Oh, God," Dane whispered. "Oh, my God." He looked at his bride. He looked at his mother-in-law. And then he looked at the guests, the witnesses to his unraveling. "Tonight is not just a wedding," Dane said, his voice hollow. "Someone is going to be investigated." The memory that Dane's terrified face unlocked did not transport me back to a happy childhood home. It dragged me straight back to a kitchen table in Graymarsh, Pennsylvania, 9 years ago. The light in that kitchen was always too yellow. It was a sickly, jaundiced hue that made everyone look tired and slightly desperate. My father, Warren Vale, sat at the head of the table. His hands were clasped over a stack of financial documents, his knuckles smooth and unblemished because he did not work with his hands. He worked with concepts like leverage and equity. My mother, Lenora, stood by the sink, washing a single wine glass with the slow, deliberate motions of someone who is listening to every word but refuses to go on the record as a witness. They looked me in the eye and delivered the verdict. Self-reliance. That was the phrase Warren used. He liked phrases that sounded noble on a LinkedIn profile, but felt like an eviction notice when spoken to his 25-year-old daughter. He spoke about discipline. He spoke about image. He spoke about the honor of the struggle. I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap, and asked for the bare minimum. I was not asking for a private university with ivy on the walls. I was asking for tuition assistance for a state school 40 minutes away. It was a public institution. It was affordable. It was a chance to get a degree that would let me stop scrubbing other people's floors. Warren sighed, the sound of a man disappointed by the quality of his investment. He told me that paying for my education would be crippling my character. He said that handing me a future would rob me of the satisfaction of earning it. I looked at Bristol. She was sitting on the counter, swinging her legs. She was 19. Beside her sat a brand new laptop, still in the box, and a glossy brochure for a study abroad program in Florence. The cost of that program alone was more than 2 years of my tuition. I pointed this out. It was a mistake. Warren slammed his hand on the table. He told me that Bristol was different. Bristol had potential that needed nurturing. Bristol was the face of the family. I was the backbone, he said, and backbones are meant to carry weight. They were investing in her because she was the asset. I was the liability that needed to be written off so I could learn to be profitable on my own. That night was not the end. It was the beginning of the grind. I did not leave immediately because I could not afford to leave. I stayed in my childhood bedroom, which had slowly been stripped of its personality to make room for Bristol's overflow storage. I took a job at a convenience store on the edge of town. It was the graveyard shift. From 10 at night until 6 in the morning, I learned the specific chemical smell of floor wax mixed with stale hot dog rollers. I learned that time moves differently at 3 in the morning under flickering fluorescent lights. I learned how to smile at truck drivers who looked at me like I was part of the menu. I made $7.25 an hour. When I came home in the morning, smelling of gasoline and cheap coffee, my mother would be making smoothies for Bristol. She would look at my uniform and wrinkle her nose. Then came the second job. I spent my afternoons cleaning offices in the business district. I emptied trash cans filled with shredded paper and Starbucks cups. I wiped down desks that belonged to people my age who had parents who paid for their degrees. I did not resent them. I just felt a heavy, dull ache in my chest that never went away. The breaking point was not a scream. It was a calculation. At the end of the month, I sat on my bed and counted my tips. I had enough for a deposit on a studio apartment if I skipped lunch for the next 3 weeks. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and I found an envelope on the counter. It was addressed to Bristol. It was an acceptance letter for a prep course for the LSATs. The receipt was stapled to the front. $2,000. $2,000. My father walked in. He saw me looking at it. He did not blink. He held out his hand and asked for my contribution to the household expenses. He called it rent. He said that since I was working 2 jobs, I should be paying market rate for my room. He took $400 from me that day. It was money I had saved for textbooks. He took it, put it in his wallet, and then handed Bristol the keys to his car so she could go celebrate her acceptance to the prep course. That was the moment the cord was cut. I did not pack a lot. I had 1 suitcase. It was red, battered, with a zipper that stuck halfway up. I packed my uniforms. I packed my 2 pairs of jeans. I packed the few books I had managed to buy secondhand. I did not write a note. A note implies that there is a conversation to be had, and we were done talking. I walked out of the house at 4 a.m. The streetlights were humming. The air was cold. I walked 3 miles to the bus station because I refused to spend money on a taxi. The next 5 years were a blur of survival. I learned the language of poverty. It is a specific dialect. I learned that you never buy the small jar of peanut butter because the price per ounce is higher. Even if you only have $3, you buy the big one and eat it for a week. I learned that a credit score is more important than a resume. I learned that a toothache is a financial emergency, not a medical one. I lived in a basement apartment with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The pipes rattled when the neighbors flushed their toilet. I ate instant noodles until the sodium made my fingers swell. I worked, and I studied, and I slept in 4-hour shifts. But the hardest part was not the hunger. It was the fear. It was the terrifying knowledge that I was 1 bad flu away from homelessness. If I got sick, I missed a shift. If I missed a shift, I was short on rent. If I was short on rent, I was on the street. There was no safety net. There was no phone call I could make. I was walking a tightrope over a canyon, and my family was on the other side, taking bets on when I would fall. That was when I started the file. It started as a way to keep track of my budget, but it morphed into something else. I saved every voicemail my mother left me, usually asking why I was being so dramatic or demanding I apologize for leaving. I saved the emails from my father explaining why I was excluded from family holidays. I saved the handwritten breakdown of the expenses they charged me before I left. I did not save them because I planned to sue them. I saved them because sometimes, in the dark, alone in that basement, I would start to wonder if I was the crazy one. They were so charming. They were so respectable. Maybe I was the ungrateful daughter. Maybe I was the problem. I needed the evidence to prove to myself that I was not imagining the cruelty. I needed to see the dates and the numbers to remind myself that their love was conditional, and the condition was my submission. Then, I met Connor. I was working at a copy shop by then, printing binding documents for a law firm. He came in to pick up a brief. He looked tired. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Not at the name tag or the uniform. He asked me if I had eaten lunch. When I said no, he did not offer to buy me a sandwich like I was a charity case. He asked if I knew a good place to get coffee because he needed a break. We sat on a bench outside. I was defensive. I was ready for him to ask about my family, about my background, about why a smart girl was working a minimum wage job. I had my script ready. I had my walls up. But he did not ask those things. He listened. And when I eventually told him a fractured, edited version of why I was alone, he did not offer platitudes. He did not say that family is everything. He did not tell me to forgive them. He looked at my hands, rough from cleaning chemicals, and he asked me what I needed to stand steady. He was the first person in my life who saw my independence not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of survival. He did not try to save me. He stood next to me while I saved myself. I looked at Dane Ketterly again, standing in the opulent hallway of the resort, surrounded by flowers that cost more than my rent for an entire year in that basement. I thought about the files on my computer. I thought about the voicemails. I thought about the $400 my father took from my hand. And I realized something. I had built a life out of scraps. I had built a fortress out of the stones they threw at me. And now, They were terrified that I would use those stones to shatter their glass house. Dane was right to be afraid, because unlike them, I had nothing to hide. My life was transparent. My struggles were documented. My victories were receipted. If they wanted to open the books, they were welcome to try, but they were going to find that the math on my side added up to the penny, and on their side, there was a deficit that no amount of charity galas could cover. The whisper network in a room like this travels faster than fiber optic cables. I could feel the labels attaching themselves to my skin like cheap price tags. To the guests standing within earshot, men in bespoke tuxedos and women holding clutches that cost more than my first car, I was not a sister. I was not a guest. I was an intruder. I was the uninvited variable in a perfectly balanced equation. My mother, Lenora, had mastered the art of social exclusion decades ago. She did not need to scream to make me feel unwelcome. She just had to tilt her head, lower her voice to a sympathetic murmur, and look at me with that specific blend of pity and exhaustion. It signaled to everyone around us that I was a burden she had been carrying for a long time, a recurring illness that had flared up at the worst possible moment. "I think it is best if you leave, Mavisa," Lenora said, her voice smooth, polished to a high sheen. "We did not account for you. The seating chart is finalized. There is simply no space." She said it as if I were a piece of furniture that clashed with the feng shui. No space. It was the same logic she used when I was 18. There was space for Bristol's dreams, but no space for my survival. Bristol, sensing the tide of opinion turning in her favor, decided to play the role she was born for. She brought a hand to her chest, right over her heart, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. Her eyes welled up with tears that seemed to appear on command. "I just do not understand why you are doing this," Bristol said, her voice trembling just enough to be audible to the groom's parents. "Today is supposed to be about love, about family unity, and you show up here, after years of silence, just to what? To make a scene, to punish me for being happy." She looked at the guests, her audience. She has always been like this, a little unstable. She holds on to grudges. I invited her because I wanted to be the bigger person, but I never thought she would actually come here and harass me. The word harass hung in the air. It was a dangerous word. It turned me from a sister into a threat. A security guard near the entrance took a step forward, his hand hovering near his radio. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I did not let it reach my voice. I had spent 9 years building a version of myself that could not be dismantled by Bristol's tears. I was not the girl who cried in the kitchen anymore. I was a project manager. I managed crises for a living. "I am not here to harass anyone," I said. My voice was steady, cutting through the performative emotion like a laser. "I am here because the invitation was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Connor Whitfall. We are SVP'd 3 weeks ago. We are on the list." I did not scream. I did not point fingers. I simply stated a fact. Bristol blinked, her rhythm disrupted. She had expected me to yell. She had expected the angry, desperate sister she remembered. She did not know how to handle the cold, corporate calm I was projecting. "Well, maybe it got lost," Bristol sniffed. "Or maybe you just assumed—" "We do not assume," Connor interrupted. Connor stepped forward, not aggressively, but with the immovable presence of a man who knows exactly who he is. He did not look at Bristol. He looked at Dane. He looked at the groom's father. He addressed the men in the room, speaking their language, the language of authority and boundaries. "My wife has been insulted 3 times in the last 5 minutes, Connor said. His tone was conversational, which made it all the more terrifying. "We are guests. We brought a gift. We drove 5 hours. If Mavisa is not welcome, you only have to say the words 'we do not want you here' clearly, without the passive-aggressive theatrics. And we will walk out that door. We will not argue. We will simply leave." He paused, letting the offer hang there. "But if we leave," Connor continued, his eyes locking onto Dane's, We leave with the understanding that this family has decided to humiliate a guest for sport, and I do not think that is the impression you want to make on your business partners. Dane. It was a checkmate move. Connor knew that men like Dane, men who work in risk assessment and high finance, care about optics more than anything else. A hysterical sister-in-law is a nuisance. A groom who bullies his guests is a liability. The tension shifted. The guests stopped looking at me with judgment and started looking at the veils with curiosity. Why were they trying so hard to get rid of this woman? Dane Ketterly was not looking at Connor, though. He was still looking at me. He was looking at me the way a bomb disposal technician looks at a wire he does not recognize. He was piecing it together. The shock I had seen earlier had morphed into a frantic, internal audit. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head. Mavisa, Moonhall, Vale, 1992. No one is leaving, Dane said abruptly. His voice was tight. Not yet. Lenora let out a breathy, nervous laugh. Dane, darling, do not be silly. If Mavisa is uncomfortable, we should let her go. She has always had trouble fitting in with this sort of crowd. She is very independent. She prefers her own way. There it was again. Independent. Lenora smiled at the groom's mother, a woman dripping in pearls. We raised our girls to be strong, of course, but Mavisa took the concept of self-reliance to an extreme. We tried to help her, naturally. We have always been a family that values education and support. That is why we started the foundation, after all. To help those who do not have the advantages we do. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in a single second. Dane's head snapped toward Lenora. The movement was so sharp I thought he might have pulled a muscle. The foundation, Dane repeated. His voice was no longer the voice of a groom. It was the voice of an interrogator. Yes, Lenora said, oblivious to the precipice she was dancing on. The Vale Pathways Foundation. Bristol has poured her heart and soul into it. It is our way of giving back, helping young women get the education they deserve. It is ironic, really, that Mavisa never appreciated the value of— Stop talking, Lenora, Dane said. This time, the command was absolute. Lenora's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes widened. She looked at her future son-in-law, confused by his tone. Dane turned his body fully toward me. He ignored his bride. He ignored his parents. He took 2 steps closer to me, invading my personal space, but not in a threatening way. It was an urgent way. He needed to see my eyes. He needed to verify the data. Mavisa, Dane said, I need you to answer a question for me, and I need you to answer it with absolute honesty, because the next 10 minutes of my life depend on it. I held his gaze. Ask. Have you ever sat on the board of directors for the Vale Pathways Foundation? The question was so specific, so bureaucratic, that it took a moment to register. No, I said. Have you ever attended a board meeting? No. Have you ever signed an annual report, a tax filing, or a grant approval for that entity? I have never heard of the Vale Pathways Foundation until 5 minutes ago, I said. I did not know it existed. I felt a strange sensation in my stomach, a mix of confusion and nausea. My parents had started a charity for education. The same parents who told me that paying for college was a handicap. The same parents who watched me work 2 jobs and sell my clothes to buy textbooks. They had set up a non-profit to help strangers while they let their own daughter drown. The hypocrisy was bitter, but Dane was not reacting to the hypocrisy. He was reacting to the crime. He looked at Bristol. Bristol was no longer crying. The tears had evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer, white-knuckled panic. She looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches while the house was already burning down. Dane, Bristol whispered, it is just a formality. It is just paperwork. Daddy said it was fine. He said, You told me you ran that foundation, Dane said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You told me it was your passion project. You showed me the binders. You showed me the impact statements. I do, Bristol pleaded. I do run it. I choose the recipients. I organize the galas. But you are not the treasurer. Dane said. And you are not the co-founder. He turned back to me, pointing a trembling finger at my face. She is, Dane said. The room went silent. I mean, truly silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the ice melting in the glasses. What? I asked. Your name, Dane said. Mavissa Vale. It is on the incorporation papers from 8 years ago. You are listed as the co-founder and the treasurer of the Vale Pathways Foundation. Your signature is on every single tax return for the last 7 years. I stared at him. The world tilted slightly on its axis. That is impossible, I said. I was not even in the state 8 years ago. I was working in a call center in Ohio. I have never signed anything for them. Dane let out a harsh, humorless laugh. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, ruining it. Then we have a problem, Dane said, because I work in compliance. Mavissa, I vet these things, and I saw the files. I saw the signatures. I saw the background checks that were supposedly run on you. He turned to his parents. The wealthy bankers. Mom, Dad, the donation you made last week, Dane said. The $50,000 for the new scholarship fund. His mother nodded slowly, looking terrified. Yes, to Bristol's charity. It is not Bristol's charity, Dane said. It is a legal entity that apparently has a ghost at the helm. He looked at Bristol, and the look was devoid of love. It was stripped clean of affection. It was clinical. You told me that foundation was transparent, Dane said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. You told me it was clean, but Mavissa's name is in the file as a founder, and if she did not sign those papers, he let the sentence hang. He did not need to finish it. Everyone in the room, the bankers, the lawyers, the business owners knew exactly how that sentence ended. If I did not sign those papers, then someone else did, and that was not a family drama. That was forgery. That was fraud. That was a felony. Lenora stepped forward, her face pale beneath the makeup. Dane, please, this is a misunderstanding. We used Mavissa's name as a placeholder. It was a gesture, a way to include her in the family legacy, even though she was gone. We were honoring her. Honoring me? I asked. My voice finally broke through the shock. You honored me by attaching my name to a foundation I knew nothing about. You honored me by forging my signature. It was for a good cause, Bristol shrieked. We helped people. Why do you have to ruin everything? Why do you have to be so petty about technicalities? Forgery is not a technicality. Bristol, Connor said. Dane turned to me. Mavissa, I need to know, right now. Did you knowingly authorize the use of your identity for the Vale Pathways Foundation? No, I said. Absolutely not, Dane nodded. He looked at his watch, then he looked at the door. The wedding is paused, Dane announced. You cannot do this. Lenora gasped. The guests, the catering, the flowers. The flowers are paid for with money that I am starting to suspect came from a very dirty place, Dane said. I am not marrying into a federal indictment. He looked at me one last time. You said you are independent, Dane said. You have no idea how lucky you are that you are independent, because if you were actually part of this family right now, you would be going down with the ship. I stood there, clutching Connor's hand, as the beautiful, expensive facade of the Vale family began to crack wide open, right there in the hallway of the Red Rock Sanctuary Resort. And for the first time in 9 years, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the witness. The silence that followed Dane's declaration was not the kind of silence you find in a library. It was the vacuum of a courtroom just before the gavel comes down. The air conditioning vents hummed overhead, a low mechanical drone that seemed to vibrate against the tension in the room. Dane Ketterly took a slow, deliberate breath. He adjusted the cuffs of his tuxedo jacket, a reflex of a man trying to organize his physical reality when his emotional reality was disintegrating. He looked at me, then at Bristol, and finally settled his gaze on his parents. You all think I just work in finance, Dane said. His voice was level. stripped of the celebratory warmth from 10 minutes ago. You think I sit in an office and move numbers from column A to column B, but that is not what I do. I work in risk assessment for the Sterling Grant Consortium. My entire job, 40 hours a week, is to audit nonprofit entities applying for educational funding. He turned to Bristol. She was trembling now, a fine vibration that made the lace on her sleeves shiver. I vet applications, Dane continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a shout because everyone was straining to hear it. I look for inconsistencies. I look for ghosts in the machine. And tonight, I did not come here just as a groom. I came here as a man who knows what a paper trail looks like. He took a step closer to Bristol. There are signatures in that file. Bristol, he said. Digital signatures, timestamps, IP addresses. If those are fake, if they are forged, that is not a family misunderstanding. That is not something we can laugh about over brunch. That is a felony. That is federal fraud. Bristol recoiled as if he had slapped her. Her face twisted, abandoning the mask of the blushing bride for the snarl of a cornered animal. You believe her, Bristol screamed. Her voice cracked, high and shrill, shattering the elegant atmosphere of the resort. She pointed a manicured finger at me. You believe her over me. She is jealous. Dane, look at her. She shows up here in a dress she probably bought at a discount store, trying to ruin my day because she is miserable. She has nothing. She is nobody. She spun around, appealing to the crowd, her eyes wide and frantic. You all see this, right? She pleaded to the guests. My sister has always been like this. She is a liar. She makes things up to get attention because our parents cut her off. She is trying to blackmail us. The guests did not step forward to comfort her. They shuffled backward. Rich people have a sixth sense for liability, and Bristol was radiating it like plutonium. Lenora saw the crowd retreating and switched tactics instantly. She abandoned the haughty matriarch act and slumped against my father, bringing a hand to her forehead. Oh, my head, Lenora moaned, her voice weak and breathy. Warren, I feel faint. This stress my heart cannot take it. Please, Dane, stop this. Not today. Can we just discuss this privately? Later, you are killing the mood. You are hurting Bristol. The mood is dead, Lenora, Dane said coldly. And I am not worried about Bristol's feelings right now. I am worried about my signature on a marriage license that links my assets to a potential criminal investigation. He pulled his phone from his inner pocket. The screen lit up his face with a harsh, blue light. I pulled the file on the drive over, Dane said, tapping the screen. I wanted to reread the mission statement for the toast. I thought it was inspiring, but then I saw the officer list. He looked at me. Mavissa, did you authorize a grant disbursement of $12,000 to a vendor named Lux Event Planning in February of last year? No, I said. Did you sign off on a scholarship fund allocation for student housing support that went to an account with the same routing number as the Vale Family Trust? No, I said. I do not even have access to the family trust. I was removed from it 9 years ago. Dane looked at Bristol. February, that was when we put the deposit down on this venue. Wasn't it? Bristol Lux Event Planning? That is the company running this wedding. The implication hit the room like a physical shockwave. The guests looked at the flowers. They looked at the champagne tower. They looked at the silk drapes. And suddenly, they realized they were not standing in a wedding reception. They were standing in a crime scene. They were drinking evidence. It was a loan, Bristol blurted out. It was just a bridge loan. The foundation owes me for all the work I do. I work for free. Dane, I give everything to those kids. I deserve to be compensated. So you embezzled it, Dane said. He did not ask. He stated it. You used donor money, tax-exempt money intended for underprivileged students to pay for your wedding. I did not, Bristol cried. I was going to pay it back once the new grant came in. The new grant, Dane repeated. The one my company is underwriting, the one I vouched for. He looked at me again, and in that moment, I saw the pieces click together in his mind. But more importantly, I felt them click together in mine. For years, I had thought my parents simply hated me. I thought they viewed me as a disappointment, a failure, a stain on their perfect reputation. I thought they cut me off because they genuinely believed in tough love, or because they just preferred Bristol. But looking at Lenora's pale face and Bristol's terrified eyes, I realized I had been wrong. They did not hate me. They needed me. They needed a name. They needed a distinct legal entity to serve as a buffer. They needed a Mavissa Moonhall on paper, someone who was absent, someone who wouldn't check the books, someone who was independent enough to be a plausible separate officer, but distant enough not to ask questions. They had not just kicked me out. They had curated my absence. They had pushed me away to ensure I would never be in the room when they forged my signature. My independence was not a lesson. It was a strategy. They needed me to be gone so they could use my ghost to rob the very system I needed help from. The irony was so sharp it tasted like copper in my mouth. They refused to pay for my college. They told me to figure it out. And then, they used my name to build a fake charity for education so they could funnel money into their own lifestyle. "You used me," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through Bristol's sobbing. "You did not just abandon me. You stole my identity to fund the life you told me I was not good enough for." "We did no such thing," Warren barked. Finally stepping in, his face was red, his bluster returning as he tried to regain control. "This is business, Mavissa. You do not understand how these things work. We were protecting assets. We were building a legacy, if your name was on a few papers. It was to help you, to build a credit history for you." "By committing fraud?" Connor asked. "That is a hell of a credit-building strategy." "Warren," Dane looked down at his phone again. "There is an email here," he said, scrolling. "From the treasurer's account. It is dated 3 days ago. It authorizes the transfer of the final payment for the catering. It was sent from an IP address in this hotel." He held the phone up, showing the screen to Bristol. "You sent this," Dane said. "You logged into an account named Mavissa Moonhall, and you authorized $50,000 to be wired to the catering company. Mavissa was not even in the state 3 days ago." Bristol's eyes darted to the phone. She stopped crying. The panic turned into action. In a split second of pure, unadulterated adrenaline, Bristol lunged. She snatched the phone out of Dane's hand. Her fingernails clicked against the screen as she frantically tapped, trying to find the delete button, trying to scrub the digital stain of her guilt. "No," she screamed. "It is not true. I am deleting it. It is gone. It is a mistake." She looked deranged, a bride in a $10,000 dress, clawing at a smartphone like it was a grenade she could deactivate if she just hit the right button. "Bristol, stop!" Dane shouted, reaching for her. "Do not touch me," she shrieked, backing away, her thumb hitting the screen over and over. "I am fixing it. I am fixing it." Connor moved. He did not lunge like Bristol. He moved with the efficiency of a man who has anticipated the violence. He stepped between Dane and Bristol, but he did not grab her. He simply placed himself there, a wall of calm capability. "Do not touch my wife," Connor said to Warren, who had started to move toward me. "And do not touch that data." He looked at Bristol. "Deleting an email does not delete the server log." "Bristol," Connor said, "it just proves mens rea the guilty mind. You are destroying evidence in front of 50 witnesses." Bristol froze. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She looked around the room. She saw the faces of her friends, her family, her fiancé's business partners. Every single one of them was looking at her with a mixture of horror and pity. The illusion was gone. The varnish had been stripped away. She was not the golden child. She was a thief in a white dress. She dropped the hand holding the phone to her side. The device slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the marble floor. The sound was incredibly loud. Dane walked over and picked up the phone. He checked the screen. The glass was cracked, but the display was still on. "You deleted the local copy," Dane said, his voice void of emotion. "But like I said, I work in risk assessment. The server archives everything." He looked at me. "Mavissa," Dane said, "I am sorry. I had no idea. I thought you were the problem. Bristol told me you were an addict. She told me you dropped out of school because you got involved with bad people. She told me the foundation was her way of trying to save others from your mistakes. I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. She told you I was an addict, I asked. Yes, Dane said. That is why no one questioned why you were not on the board calls. She said you were in rehab. She said you were silent partner because you were not stable enough to handle the responsibility. I looked at my mother. Lenora looked away. She could not meet my eyes. They had not just stolen my name. They had murdered my reputation to cover their tracks. They had painted me as a drug addict to explain why the treasurer of their foundation never showed her face. Every time they forged my signature, they justified it to the world by saying, "Poor Mavisa. She is struggling. We are just handling this for her." I was their scapegoat and their cash cow. I have never touched a drug in my life, I said. I work as a senior project manager for a logistics firm. I own my home. I pay my taxes. And I paid for my own education, one credit at a time, while you told the world I was a junkie so you could steal money. Dane nodded. He put the phone in his pocket. I believe you, he said. He turned to his parents. Mom, Dad, Dane said. Go to the car. We are leaving. But the reception, his mother stammered. The guests. There is no reception, Dane said. There is no wedding. I am not marrying into this, and I'm certainly not going to be an accessory to it. He looked at Bristol. She was standing alone in the center of the hallway, the space around her empty. I need to make a phone call, Dane said. To the compliance officer at Sterling. I have to report a conflict of interest and a potential fraud, because if I do not report it tonight, and this comes out later, I lose my license. I lose my career. You would turn us in, Bristol whispered. You love me. I loved who I thought you were, Dane said. But the person standing there, the person who stole her sister's identity and deleted evidence, I do not know who that is, but I know she is a liability I cannot afford. He turned to me. Mavisa, he said, do not leave town. The investigators are going to need to talk to you. I am not going anywhere, I said. I have nothing to hide. As Dane walked away, dialing a number on his cracked phone, the reality of the situation settled over the Vale family. They were not just facing a ruined wedding, they were facing the end of their world. And all I had done was show up. We walked out of the ballroom and into the cooling desert air of Sedona. But the silence we found there was deceptive. The physical noise of the wedding, the clinking glasses, the string quartet, the murmur of judgment was behind us. Yet the real noise had just begun. It was vibrating in my pocket. My phone buzzed against my thigh, then it buzzed again, and again, a relentless rhythmic spasm of notifications. Connor did not say a word. He simply took my arm, guiding me through the valet stand with the efficiency of a bodyguard extracting a VIP from a hostile zone. He handed the ticket to the attendant, his face set in a mask of calm determination, but I could feel the tension in his grip. It was not fear, it was readiness. We did not drive back to our home. We drove to a small, nondescript coffee shop about 5 miles away from the resort. A place with fluorescent lighting and plastic booths that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the silk and orchids of the Vale wedding. We needed neutral ground. We needed a place where the air did not smell of expensive perfume and betrayal. We sat down. I placed my phone on the table. The screen lit up with a name I did not expect to see so soon. Dane Ketterly. The text was short, stripped of all social pleasantries. I am at the business center in the main lodge. I need you to verify something. I am not asking as your brother-in-law. I am asking as a compliance officer. Can you come back? Or can I send you a file? I looked at Connor. He was already opening his laptop, tethering it to his phone's hotspot. Do not go back there, Connor said. If you step foot on that property again, Lenora will try to corner you. She will try to make this emotional. We keep this digital. We keep this evidentiary. He was right. If I went back, my mother would cry, my father would shout, Bristol would beg, and for a second, just a second, the old programming might kick in. The programming that told me I was the problem. The programming that told me it was my job to fix the family. Tell him to send the file, I told Connor. And tell him to use an encrypted channel. I unlocked my phone and typed the reply. 2 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox. It was a PDF, a grant application. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a photo of me. It was an old photo, taken from my high school yearbook. I looked young, hopeful, unaware that in a few months I would be evicted from my own life. Below the photo was a paragraph of text that made bile rise in my throat. The Vale Pathways Foundation was inspired by the journey of our co-founder, Mavisa Moonhall, choosing the difficult path of total independence. Mavisa demonstrated that true resilience is built when safety nets are removed. Her success story is the blueprint for our Tough Love for Tomorrow initiative, which seeks to empower young adults to succeed without handouts. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. They had not just stolen my money, they had stolen my trauma. They had taken the worst moment of my life, the moment my father looked at me and told me I was not worth investing in, and they had repackaged it as a heartwarming origin story. They had turned my starvation into a marketing pitch. They had turned my loneliness into a brand. They monetized it, I whispered. Connor, look at this. They are selling my independence to donors. Connor read the screen over my shoulder. His jaw tightened. This is not just a lie, Connor said. This is a material misrepresentation of fact to secure funding. This is the definition of fraud. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was back in that kitchen 9 years ago. I heard my father's voice, self-reliance. I realized now that he had not been teaching me a lesson. He had been a bee testing a slogan. I need to check the archives, I said. I opened a folder on my laptop labeled Grey Marsh Backup. It was the digital equivalent of a bomb shelter. Inside were the recordings I had made during those final days, the voicemails I had saved, and the screenshots of bank accounts I had taken before my access was revoked. I found the file I was looking for. It was a screenshot of a savings account titled Mavisa Education Fund. It was dated 2 months before I left home. The balance was $18,400. It was money my grandmother had left me. Money my father controlled as the custodian until I turned 25. I opened the next screenshot. Dated 3 weeks later, balance 0, transaction history, transfer to external account ending in 4492. I had always assumed my father had simply taken the money back, absorbing it into the family pot because he felt entitled to it. But now, looking at the grant application Dane had sent, I saw the bank account number for the Vale Pathways Foundation listed at the bottom of the page. It ended in 4492. They had not just spent my money, they had used my money to seed the bank account of the fake charity they used to launder their reputation. They used my inheritance to start the foundation that I supposedly co-founded, I said, my voice shaking with a cold, hard rage. Connor placed a hand on my arm. Stop, he said gently. Do not get angry. Anger makes you sloppy. We do not want revenge. Mavisa. We want an audit, he pointed to the screen. You work for Hearthstead Grantworks. Connor said, you are a senior project manager for one of the largest private education funders in the state. Do you have a compliance contact? Yes, I said. Sarah Jenkins. She is the head of internal review. Draft an email, Connor said. Subject line identity theft and conflict of interest. Attach the grant application Dane sent you. Attach your driver's license. Attach a sworn statement that you never signed these documents. And copy Dane. Why copy Dane? I asked. Because Dane is the whistleblower, Connor said. If you loop him in officially, he is protected, and it forces him to act. He cannot bury this if there is a paper trail between two organizations. I started typing. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I did not use emotional language. I did not use adjectives. I wrote in the language of bureaucracy, to whom it may concern. I am writing to report a fraudulent use of my identity in a grant application currently under review. Please find attached evidence proving that the signature on the Vail Pathways Foundation documents is not mine. Furthermore, I have no affiliation with this entity and have never authorized the use of my likeness or personal history for their fundraising materials. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dane. I put it on speaker. "Mavisa," Dane said. His voice sounded hollow, like he was speaking from inside a tunnel. "I got the email. I wanted to hear you say it. I wanted to hear you say that the story in the brochure is false." "The story is true. Dane," I said. "I did leave home. I did become independent, but I did not do it to inspire anyone. I did it because they kicked me out, and I certainly did not start a foundation to celebrate it." There was a long silence on the other end. "They asked for $200,000, Dane said quietly. "The Vail Pathways Foundation applied for a Tier 1 grant from my company, $200,000 to expand their mentorship program, and the entire pitch was built around you. They said you were the success story. They said you were the proof that their method works." "And where was that money going to go?" "Dane," I asked. "I do not know," Dane admitted. "But looking at the venue for this wedding, looking at Bristol's dress, looking at the new car in your father's driveway, I think I have a pretty good idea." "You need to walk away." "Dane," Connor said, leaning toward the phone, "not just from the marriage, from the liability. If you sign off on that grant now, knowing what you are a co-conspirator." "I know," Dane said. "I have already flagged it. I put a hold on the funds, but Mavisa there is something else." "What?" I asked. When I was digging through the credit report attached to the application, Dane said, "I found a discrepancy. It is not about the foundation, it is about you." My stomach dropped. "What about me?" "There is a loan," Dane said. "A student loan. It was taken out 9 years ago. It is for $40,000. "I do not have any student loans," I said. "I paid for my community college classes in cash. I worked 2 jobs. I have 0 debt." "According to this report, you have $40,000 in debt," Dane said. "It was a private loan, co-signed by Warren Vail, but the primary borrower is Mavisa Vail. The funds were dispersed to an account wait." I heard the sound of typing on the other end. "The funds were dispersed to the same account ending in 4492, Dane said. "The foundation account." The room spun. "They took out a student loan in my name," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They used my social security number to take out a loan, claiming it was for my education, and they funneled the money into their charity account. And they have been making the minimum interest-only payments for 9 years to keep it from defaulting," Dane said. "That is why you never saw it on your credit score. It is in good standing. They have been servicing the debt just enough to keep it invisible." "Why?" I asked. "Why would they do that?" "Because $40,000 is a lot of liquidity," Connor said. His face was dark. "And if they get a tax deduction for the interest payments through the foundation, they are basically stealing money and getting a tax break for it." I stared at the phone. I had thought I was free. I had thought that by walking out that door 9 years ago, I had escaped them. I thought that by refusing their money, I had removed their power over me, but I was wrong. I had never been free. Even while I was scrubbing floors and eating instant noodles, they were using my name to borrow money. Even while I was building a career and fighting to establish my own identity, they were using my shadow to run a scam. They had not just cut me off, they had turned me into a host body for their greed. "Send me the loan documents." "Dane," I said. "I will," Dane said. "And Mavisa, I am sorry. I really am." He hung up. I looked at Connor. I felt a coldness settling into my bones that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "They own a debt in my name," I said. "If they stop paying it tomorrow, my credit is ruined. They have been holding a grenade with the pin pulled for 9 years, just waiting for the moment I tried to really leave." Connor closed his laptop. He reached across the table and took my hands. "No," Connor said. They are not holding a grenade. They are holding evidence of identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud. He looked me in the eye. We are not going to let them default, Connor said. We are going to let them explain to a federal investigator why they took out a student loan for a daughter they refused to send to college. I looked at the phone. Where the email from Dane was already arriving, the sadness was gone. The hurt was gone. The only thing left was the cold, hard clarity of the audit trail. Let us go home, I said. I have a lot of printing to do. By the time we crossed the state line back into California, the narrative had already been written, edited, and published without my consent. Small towns like Graymarsh do not need the internet to spread rumors, but they certainly know how to use it to accelerate the damage. My phone, which I had silenced, was vibrating against the center console of the car with a persistence that felt like a heartbeat. It was not people checking in on me. It was the digital shrapnel of the explosion we had left behind in Sedona. I opened Instagram, against Connor's advice, and there it was. Bristol had posted a story. It was a black screen with small white text in a fragile, italicized font. Some people are so consumed by their own darkness that they have to extinguish every light they see. Please respect our privacy as we deal with a family crisis caused by a jealous relative. Love wins. Eventually. She did not tag me. She did not have to. The comment section on her previous photo, a picture of her and Dane kissing at the rehearsal dinner, was already filling up with sympathizers. So sorry you have to deal with her. Weddings always bring out the crazy in people. Stay strong. Queen, don't let the toxic ones win. I watched the likes tick up. 100, 200. People I went to high school with, people who had watched me scrub floors at the community center, were now double-tapping a post that painted me as the villain. They were rewriting reality in real time. To them, I was not the victim of identity theft. I was the unstable older sister who had crashed the wedding to scream at the bride. Stop looking at it, Connor said, his eyes on the road. It is noise. It is smoke. They are trying to provoke a reaction so they can point at it and say, "See, she is crazy." I am not going to react, I said. Locking the phone. I do not care what the cheerleading squad of Graymarsh High thinks. I care about what the compliance department thinks. We got home late. Our apartment, usually a sanctuary of quiet minimalism, felt like a command center. We did not unpack. We went straight to the dining table. Connor set up his laptop. I set up mine. At 8 a.m, the first real weapon in our arsenal arrived. It was an email from Sarah Jenkins, the head of compliance at Hearthstead Grant Works. It was not a form letter. Mavissa, I received your report. I have pulled the application from the Vale Pathways Foundation from our review queue. I also ran a preliminary cross-reference on the officer list. The signature on the 990 tax form dated 3 years ago does not match the signature on your W-4 form on file here. The loop on the M is completely different. Also, the IP address used to submit the application traces back to a residential ISP in Pennsylvania, not your address in California. We are opening a formal independent review. We are also obligated to notify the other grant-making bodies in the network. This is going to get loud. Are you prepared for that? I typed back immediately. Burn it down. Sarah. Every single page. But while I was dealing with the corporate fallout, Dane was dealing with the family siege. He called me at noon. He sounded exhausted. I could hear the background noise of an airport terminal. They are threatening to sue me for breach of promise, Dane said. His voice was flat, detached. Your father called me this morning. He said if I do not go through with the wedding and sign the marriage certificate within 48 hours, he will sue me for emotional distress and financial damages. He said I humiliated his daughter in front of important stakeholders. He is bluffing, I said. Warren does not have the money for a lawsuit. He is hoping you will panic. He also said something else. Dane continued. He said that if I persist with this witch hunt, he will release information about my past that could be damaging. He implies he has dirt on me. Does he? I asked. No, Dane said. But that is the thing about your family. Mavissa, they do not need facts. They just need a rumor sticky enough to ruin a reputation. He told me that I have a choice: become a veil or become a target. Do not sign anything. Dane, I said, we are closer than you think. Connor, sitting across from me, suddenly stopped typing. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. Mavissa, he said, do you remember your old email address? The one you used in high school? Mavissa*92@gmail? Yes, I said. I abandoned it when I left home. I did not want them to be able to contact me. Did you delete it? No, I said. I just stopped logging in. I forgot the password years ago. Well, Connor said, turning his laptop around to face me. Someone didn't forget it, or rather, someone reset it. He pointed to a log on the screen. I ran a search on your old handle, Connor explained. That email address is listed as the recovery email for the Vail Pathways Foundation's administrative account. But look at this. He highlighted a line of text. Password recovery initiated via security questions September 12th, 2 years ago. September 12th, I whispered. That was the day I got promoted to senior manager at Hearthstead. I posted about it on LinkedIn. Exactly, Connor said. You got a high-profile job in the grant world. And on that exact same day, someone in Pennsylvania answered the security question on your old email account to regain access. Do you know what the question was? I nodded slowly. Name of your first pet. Buster, Connor said. The dog Bristol got for her 10th birthday. So they hacked my old email, I said, feeling the cold logic of it settle in. Why? To verify accounts, Connor said. To click I accept on DocuSign envelopes. To create a digital footprint that looks like you were active. They used your high school email to impersonate you, knowing that if anyone checked, it would trace back to an address you actually created. It was a violation so intimate, it made my skin crawl. They had climbed into the digital skin I shed 9 years ago and walked around in it, signing contracts and opening doors. I need to make a call, I said. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the National Credit Reporting Agency. I had spent the last hour digging through the file Dane sent over the credit report that showed the mysterious loan. The hold music was a tinny, distorted jazz track that looped every 30 seconds. I sat there for 45 minutes, staring at the wall, while Connor continued to screenshot evidence of the email hack. Finally, a human voice answered. Security Department, this is Brenda. Hi, Brenda, I said. My name is Mavissa Moonhall. I am looking at a credit report that lists a private student loan opened 9 years ago. I did not open this loan. Okay, ma'am, Brenda said, sounding bored. I need to verify your identity. Can you tell me the amount of the monthly payment? $212.50, I said, reading from Dane's file. And the cosigner on the account. Warren Vail, I said. The name tasted like ash. Okay, Brenda said. I see the account here. It is currently in good standing. The payments are being made via autodraft from an entity called VPF Operating, Vail Pathways Foundation, I said. Brenda, I need to know where the original disbursement went. When the loan was taken out, $40,000 was paid out. Where did it go? I cannot give you the full account number of the recipient, Brenda said. But I can tell you it was wired to a university bursar's office. No, wait. She paused. I heard her typing. That is unusual, Brenda muttered. It looks like it was a direct-to-consumer private loan. Those were popular a decade ago. The check was cut directly to the borrower. It was deposited into a joint checking account at First Pennsylvania Bank. Can you see the date of the deposit? I asked. June 15th, 9 years ago. Brenda said. I froze. June 15th. I grabbed a notepad. I wrote down the date. Thank you, Brenda, I said. Please flag this account for fraud. I will be sending a police report within the hour. I hung up. I looked at Connor. June 15th, I said. Connor, look up Bristol's Facebook timeline from 9 years ago. Look for June. Connor typed. He scrolled, and then he stopped. He turned the screen toward me. It was a photo album titled Summer of Dreams. The cover photo was Bristol, 19 years old, standing in front of the Duomo in Florence, holding a gelato. She was wearing a designer sundress and sunglasses that I knew cost $300. The caption read, "So grateful to my parents for making this happen. Study abroad. Semester starts now. Blessed Europe independent woman." The date on the first photo was June 20th, 5 days after the loan hit the account. "They took out a $40,000 student loan in my name," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and vindication. Warren co-signed it to get it approved because I had no credit history, and then they took the cash and used it to pay for Bristol's trip to Italy. "They financed her summer of dreams with your credit score," Connor said, "and then they used the foundation's money donor money to pay the interest on the loan, so you would never find out. It was a perfect circle of theft. They stole my identity to get the loan, they stole donor money to pay the loan, and Bristol got to go to Europe while I was eating ramen in a basement. The spending matches," I said. "The flight, the apartment in Florence, the tuition for that art history course she failed. It all adds up to $40,000. "We have them," Connor said. "This proves personal benefit. This pierces the corporate veil of the foundation. They are not just bad at paperwork. Mavissa, they are embezzlers." My phone buzzed again. I looked down, expecting another hate comment or an update from Dane. It was a text from my mother. "Mavissa, please, come home. Your father is having chest pains. He is calling for you. We need to put this behind us. Family is all we have. Please, just come talk to us. We can fix this." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. The medical emergency card, the guilt trip, the "we can fix this" promise that really meant, "we can silence you." I stared at the words. 9 years ago. That text would have made me turn the car around. 9 years ago, I would have panicked. I would have thought, maybe they do love me. But I was not that girl anymore. I was about to delete the message when another notification popped up. It was an email from an unknown sender. The subject line was blank. I opened it. It was a single image attached, a photo taken in a dimly lit room, likely a home office. It showed a physical file folder lying open on a mahogany desk, my father's desk. The document in the folder was a list of beneficiaries for the Vale Pathways Foundation. My name was at the top of the list, Mavissa Vale, but someone had taken a red marker and circled my name. And next to it, in handwriting I did not recognize, they had written a note, "The Shield," and below that, a date audit scheduled for next month. I looked at Connor. "Someone is inside the house," I said. "Someone is sending us evidence." "Who?" Connor asked. "I do not know," I said. "But they just told us exactly why my parents are panicking. They are not just afraid of the wedding audit. They have a federal audit coming up next month, and if I am not there to play the role of the Shield, they go to prison." I looked back at my mother's text about chest pains. "He is not having a heart attack," I said, putting the phone down on the table with a heavy clatter. "He is having a deadline." They did not come to apologize. They came to negotiate a settlement, like a corporation trying to acquire a smaller company before a scandal hit the stock market. My father and mother flew into San Francisco less than 24 hours after I sent the email to Hearthstead Grant Works. They demanded to come to my home. They wanted to sit on my couch, drink my coffee, and use the intimacy of a living room to manipulate me. They wanted to play the family card in a space where they felt they still held jurisdiction. I refused. I told them that if they wanted to speak to me, they would do it on my terms, in my territory. I booked Conference Room B at the Hearthstead Satellite office downtown. It is a room with glass walls, harsh white lighting, and a camera in the corner. It is a room designed for performance reviews and termination meetings. It is a room where emotions go to die under the weight of fluorescent bulbs. I also asked Sarah Jenkins, the head of compliance, to sit in. I introduced her simply as a colleague. I did not tell them she was the woman who had just flagged their foundation for fraud. I wanted witnesses. I wanted a record. When Warren and Lenora walked in, they looked out of place. In the wedding venue, surrounded by silk and champagne, they looked powerful. Here, against the gray carpet and the steel table, they looked aged. My father's suit was wrinkled from the flight. My mother's makeup was perfect, but it sat on her skin like a mask that was starting to crack. They hesitated at the door when they saw Sarah and Connor sitting on either side of me. "Mavisa," Lenora said, her voice trembling with a carefully curated fragility. "We thought this would be private, just family." "This is not a family reunion," I said. My voice was steady. I did not stand up to greet them. "This is a meeting to discuss a financial irregularity. Sarah is here to take minutes," Warren scoffed, pulling out a chair and sitting down with a heavy sigh. He placed his leather briefcase on the table, trying to claim space. "You are being ridiculous," Warren said. "You are acting like we are enemies. We flew all the way here to talk some sense into you, not to be interrogated by your coworkers." He looked at me with that familiar mix of disappointment and authority. "You are overreacting, Mavisa," he continued. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic. You ruined your sister's wedding, and now you are trying to ruin our reputation because of a few clerical errors. It is childish." "Clerical errors," I repeated. I opened the folder in front of me. I took out a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the loan application for $40,000, dated 9 years ago. I slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of Warren's hands. "Who signed this?" I asked. Warren did not look at the paper. He looked at me, his eyes cold. "It was a necessary step," Warren said. "We needed to secure funding for the family during a liquidity crunch. You were part of the family. We used your credit profile because ours was fully leveraged at the time. It was a business decision." "I was not part of the family," I said. "I was living in a basement apartment eating rice because you told me I had to be independent. You told me you had no money for me, but you had enough credit savvy to forge my name on a loan application." "We paid it," Lenora interjected, leaning forward. Her eyes were pleading, but it was the pleading of a woman who is afraid of consequences, not a woman who is sorry. "Mavisa, honey, we have made every single payment. You have never paid a dime. We handled it. It actually helped your credit score. We were building a financial history for you. You should be thanking us." The audacity of it was breathtaking. "You took out $40,000 in my name," I said. "And you spent it on Bristol's trip to Italy." Lenora flinched. She looked at Warren. "It was not just for the trip," Warren muttered. "It was for general expenses, education, Bristol's cultural education. You financed her vacation with my identity," I said, "and then you used the foundation and entity that is tax-exempt to pay off the loan. That is tax fraud. Warren, you are using charitable donations to pay off a private debt that you acquired by committing identity theft." "It is just paperwork," Warren snapped. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing in the glass room. Sarah Jenkins did not flinch, but she made a note on her legal pad. "You do not understand how the world works, Mavisa. You think everything is black and white in finance. You move assets around, you use what is available. It was a bridge, a temporary measure." "Temporary?" I asked. "It has been 9 years. We were going to pay it off," Warren shouted. "Once the big grant came through, the grant from your company, we were going to wipe the slate clean." "So you were going to use my employer's money," I said, "to pay off the debt you stole from me, all while using a fake story about my life to get the money in the first place." "It is not a fake story," Lenora cried. "You are independent. You are a success. We are proud of you. Why can't you let us use that story to help others? Why do you have to be so selfish?" "Because it is a lie," I said. "You did not teach me independence. You abandoned me, and you do not want to help others. You want to pay your bills." Connor leaned forward. He had been silent until now, a statue of calm beside me. "You keep saying it is just paperwork," Connor said. "You keep saying it is a formality." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. It was a blank affidavit. "If it is just a formality," Connor said, sliding the paper toward them. Then sign this. It is a sworn statement that you had Mavisa's verbal power of attorney to sign those documents on her behalf. If you sign this, and we notarize it right now, the fraud charge goes away. It becomes a civil dispute. Warren looked at the paper. He looked at the pen Connor placed next to it. Go ahead, Connor said. Sign it. Declare under penalty of perjury that Mavisa gave you permission. Warren stared at the pen. His hand twitched. He knew that if he signed that paper, and I testified that I never gave permission, he was adding perjury to his list of crimes. He knew that a lie told in a text message is different from a lie told on a legal affidavit. He did not pick up the pen. I am not signing anything without my lawyer, Warren grumbled, pushing the paper away. Then it is not a formality, Connor said. It is forgery, and you know it. Lenora started to cry. It was a soft, weeping sound that I had heard 1,000 times. It was the sound she made whenever she wanted my father to stop yelling or whenever she wanted to avoid a difficult conversation. Please, Lenora sobbed. We are ruining everything. Bristol is a wreck. The wedding vendors, they are calling us. They want the final payments. The accounts are frozen because of what you did. Mavisa, we cannot pay the florist. We cannot pay the caterer. Do you want your sister to be sued? Do you want us to lose the house? Wait, I said. I looked at Lenora. You cannot pay the florist. I asked, why would the foundation accounts being frozen stop you from paying the florist? The foundation money is for scholarships. The wedding money should be in your personal account. Lenora froze. She stopped crying instantly. She realized she had walked into a trap of her own making. She looked at Warren, panic rising in her eyes. I mean, Lenora stammered, we move funds. It is all one pot. Really, we were going to reimburse the foundation once the wedding gifts came in. The silence in the room was absolute. You are paying for the wedding with the charity money, I said. It was not a question. It was a realization. You are not just embezzling to pay off old loans, I said. You are actively looting the foundation right now to pay for a party in Sedona. That is why Dane found the transfer to the event planner. It was not a mistake. It was the budget. Warren's face turned a deep, dangerous shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged. The mask of the sophisticated businessman fell away, revealing the angry, desperate man beneath. So what if we did? Warren roared. He stood up, knocking his chair back against the glass wall. It is my money, Warren shouted. I built that name. I built that reputation. I raised the money if I need to borrow some of it to give my daughter the wedding she deserves. That is my right. I put the work in. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You think you are so high and mighty, Warren spat. You think you are better than us because you have a job and a 401k, but you are ungrateful. Do you think you deserve to have your tuition paid? Do you? The question hung in the air, toxic and heavy. It transported me straight back to the kitchen table. You were mediocre. Mavisa, Warren yelled. You were average. Bristol was special. She needed the help. You were always going to be a grinder, a worker bee. Why should I have wasted capital on you when I could invest in her? There it was. The truth. It wasn't about independence. It wasn't about character. It was about ROI, return on investment. My father looked at his children like stocks. Bristol was the high-risk, high-reward growth stock. I was the low-yield bond. He had short-sold me to buy more of her. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for 2 decades, the man whose approval I had craved so desperately that I saved his voicemails just to hear his voice. And suddenly, he looked small. He looked like a thief shouting in a glass box. I stood up. I am mediocre, I said. You are right. Warren, I am very average. I go to work. I pay my bills. I follow the law. I do not steal from charities. I do not forge signatures. I do not lie to the IRS. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. And do you know what the best thing about being average is? I asked. It means I am not in handcuffs. I turned to Sarah Jenkins. Did you get all of that? I asked. Yes. Sarah said, her pen hovering over the pad. I believe he just confessed to commingling funds and misappropriation of assets on the record. Lenora gasped. She looked at Sarah, realizing for the first time who the silent woman in the corner was. Who are you? Lenora whispered. Compliance, Sarah said, and I am required to report this conversation to the State Attorney General. Warren slumped back into his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked at his hands. Mavissa, Warren said, his voice quiet now, defeated. You cannot do this. We are your parents. No, I said. You are my debtors. I picked up my folder. I signaled to Connor. This meeting is over, I said. From this moment on, you do not contact me. You do not text me. You do not email me. You do not show up at my house. Any communication goes through my lawyer. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. And one more thing, I said, looking back at them. You are going to take my name off everything. The foundation, the loans, the brochures. If I see my name on so much as a sticky note in your house, I will sue you until you do not even own the clothes you are wearing. We are family. Lenora wept. I know, I said. That is why I have to protect myself. I opened the door and walked out. Connor followed me. We left them sitting in the glass room, under the harsh white lights, with the compliance officer writing down the details of their ruin. I did not feel happy. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like I had just cut off a gangrenous limb. It hurt, but I knew that for the first time in 9 years, the poison was finally out of my system. The weeks that followed were not defined by screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. They were defined by the quiet, terrifying rustle of paper. When a lie is told socially, it can be fought with words, but when a lie is told financially, it is fought with audits, and an audit is not a battle, it is an autopsy. The investigation opened by Hearthstead Grant Works was surgical. Sarah Jenkins did not care about my family dynamics. She did not care about who was the favorite child or who had been kicked out. She cared about the general ledger. She cared about the alignment of debit columns and credit columns. She cared about the fact that the Vail Pathways Foundation listed student housing support as a line item. But the checks were written to a luxury rental agency in Tuscany. I sat in my living room, which had effectively become a war room. Connor had covered our dining table in a grid of sticky notes and printed spreadsheets. We were building a timeline. We were not doing this to be petty. We were doing this because Sarah had warned us that when the State Attorney General got involved, they would come for everyone listed as an officer. That meant they would come for me. I had to prove a negative. I had to prove that I was not the treasurer. I had to prove that the Mavissa Vail who signed the checks was a fiction created by my sister's hand. Dane Ketterly became a strange, tragic ally in this process. He called me on a Tuesday night. It was late. His voice was thick, like he had been drinking or crying, or perhaps both. I canceled the venue, Dane said. I sent out the email to the guests this morning. I cited unforeseen family circumstances. It is the polite way of saying the bride is under investigation for embezzlement. I am sorry. Dane, I said, and I meant it. He was a man who thought he was buying a future, and instead, he had bought a lawsuit. Do not be sorry, Dane said. You saved me. If I had signed that marriage license, if I had merged my assets with hers, I would be liable. I would be explaining to my board of directors why my wife was using grant money to buy designer shoes. He paused. I heard the click of a lighter. Bristol is begging me to reconsider, Dane said. She says we can fix it. She says she will pay it back. She does not get it. Mavissa, she thinks this is a debt. She does not understand that it is a crime. She has never had to face a consequence in her life, I said. She thinks everything is negotiable. I cannot do it, Dane said. I love her, or I thought I did, but I work in risk, and I cannot marry a woman who can look me in the eye and lie about $40,000. If I sweep this under the rug, if I let it go to save face, I become her accomplice. I cannot be that man. You are doing the right thing, I said. It does not feel like it, Dane replied. It feels like I'm shooting a wounded animal. Bristol, for her part, had moved from denial to bargaining. She stopped posting vague quotes on Instagram. Instead, she started sending me emails. They were frantic, disjointed streams of consciousness sent at 3 a.m. Mavisa, please, you have to stop this. It wasn't my idea. Mom and Dad said it was the only way. They said the foundation needed a third officer to get the tax status. I just signed your name because you weren't there. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just doing what they told me. They said they were saving the money for you, in case you ever came back. It was a lie, of course, but it was a revealing one. Bristol was pivoting. She was realizing that the ship was sinking, and she was scrambling to climb onto the only life raft left the narrative that she was just a helpless child following orders. She was throwing Warren and Lenora to the wolves to save herself. I did not reply. Connor told me that any response could be used to claim I was coordinating with her, so I let the emails pile up, a digital monument to her panic. But the hardest part was not the anger, it was the nausea. As the investigation deepened, we started to see the scope of the deception. It wasn't just the wedding, it wasn't just the student loan, it was everything. The Vale Pathways Foundation was a hollow shell. They had collected donations from local businesses, from the Rotary Club, from our neighbors. People in Graymarsh had given $50, $100, believing they were helping underprivileged kids go to college. And where did the money go? It went to administrative fees. It went to travel expenses for board meetings that took place in resorts. It went to a consulting salary for Bristol. They had scammed the community that trusted them, and they had used my face to do it. On Thursday, the breakthrough happened. Sarah Jenkins sent over a secure file. It was a forensic analysis of the foundation's initial funding. Mavisa. The note read, "We found the seed money. The foundation was capitalized 9 years ago with a single, anonymous donation. It gave them the liquidity they needed to open the bank account and apply for 501c3 status. We traced the source. I opened the attachment. The document showed a bank transfer. Date August 3rd, 9 years ago. Amount $18,400. Source, a closed savings account at First Pennsylvania Bank. Donor anonymous." I stared at the number. $18,400. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "Connor," I whispered. "Look at the date." Connor looked. He frowned. Then his eyes went wide. "August 3rd, Connor said. "That is the day after you left." "And the amount?" I said. $18,400. "That is the exact amount that was in your education fund," Connor said. "The money your grandmother left you, the money Warren said was gone." It hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They hadn't just taken the money and spent it on a car or a vacation. That would have been simple greed. This was something far more twisted. They had taken the money that was supposed to pay for my freedom, my education, my future, and they had used it to fund the lie that would replace me. They took my college fund, donated it to themselves anonymously to get a tax write-off, and used that capital to start the charity that they then used to steal from others. They built the foundation on the corpse of my future. I felt cold, bone-deep cold. "They washed it," I said. "They laundered my inheritance. They turned my college money into their seed capital, and then they had the audacity to write a brochure about how I succeeded without help." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the San Francisco fog was rolling in, obscuring the streetlights. "They did not just want me gone," I said. "They wanted to consume me. They ate my future to feed their image." Connor came up behind me. He did not touch me. He knew I felt too brittle to be touched. "We have them," Connor said quietly. "This proves the intent. This proves the premeditation. It links the theft of your personal funds directly to the creation of the fraudulent entity. It is the smoking gun." Mavisa. "I do not want a smoking gun," I said. "I want my $18,000 back. I want the 9 years of struggle back. I want the nights I slept in my car back. We cannot get the time back, Connor said. But we can make sure they never do this to anyone else. The phone rang. It was not Dane. It was not my parents. It was Bristol. I watched the screen light up. I did not answer. Then, a text message came through. You do not understand. I have no money. I have no degree. I have never had a real job. If this goes down, I have nothing. I am not like you. Mavisa, I do not know how to survive. Please, I am drowning. I stared at the words, for the first time. I looked at Bristol not as the villain, but as the product. I had always envied her. I had envied the support she got, the praise, the easy path. But looking at that text, I realized the truth. My parents had given me nothing, and in doing so, they had forced me to build muscles they could never take away. I knew how to budget. I knew how to work. I knew how to stand up when the world knocked me down. But Bristol. They had given her everything. They had smoothed every road, paid every bill, and covered every mistake. They had crippled her. They had turned her into a woman who was 30 years old and terrified of the world. A woman who had to commit fraud just to maintain the lifestyle she was told she deserved. She was not the golden child. She was the sacrifice. They had eaten her too. They just used a different seasoning. She is right, I said to Connor, showing him the text. She has no way out. She is stuck in the cage they built for her. That does not make her innocent, Connor said. She signed the checks. I know, I said, but it makes her pathetic. I typed a reply. I did not offer help. I did not offer forgiveness. I offered the only thing I had left to give the truth. Then you better learn how to swim. Bristol, because the water is rising, and Mom and Dad are going to stand on your shoulders to keep themselves dry. I put the phone down. The investigation was closing in. The evidence was undeniable. The timeline was locked. Dane had canceled the wedding. The compliance team had flagged the accounts. The forensic accountants had traced the stolen inheritance. The house of cards was falling. And for the first time, I wasn't watching from the outside, wishing I could get in. I was watching from the outside, grateful that I wasn't inside when the roof collapsed. The courier arrived at my office at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. He did not look like the kind of person who delivers good news. He wore a windbreaker with a generic logistics logo, and he made me sign for the envelope with a stylus that felt heavy in my hand. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and stamped with the words, "Personal and confidential" in red ink. I took it to my desk. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I used a letter opener to slice the seal. Inside, there was no check, no apology, and no surrender. There was a legal threat. It was a cease and desist order, drafted by a law firm in Philadelphia that I knew charged $600 an hour. The language was aggressive, designed to intimidate. It accused me of harassment, tortious interference with business relations, and defamation of character. Ms. Moonhall has engaged in a systematic campaign to destroy the reputation of the Vale family and the Vale Pathways Foundation. The letter read, "Her malicious spreading of false narratives regarding the Foundation's financial practices has caused irreparable harm to our clients. We demand that she immediately retract all statements made to third-party auditors and cease all contact with donors and vendors. They were suing me, or threatening to. They were claiming that I was the aggressor. They were claiming that by reporting the theft of my identity, I was the one committing a crime. I called Connor immediately. They are trying to flip the script," Connor said, his voice coming through the speakerphone calm and sharp. "It is a classic defense strategy: Darvo, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. They want to make you too scared to testify." "It says they will seek damages for the canceled wedding," I said, reading the second page. "They are blaming me for the venue cancellation. They want reimbursement for the deposits." "Let them try," Connor said. "Discovery works both ways. If they sue you, we get to subpoena their bank records. They are bluffing, Mavisa. But it tells us one thing." "What?" "They are desperate," Connor said. And desperate people make mistakes. Speaking of which, Bristol came to see me today. I froze. She came to your office. She waited in the lobby, Connor said. She ambushed me on my way to lunch. She looked unraveled. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, and her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. What did she want? I asked. She wanted to make a deal, Connor said. She told me that if I could get you to back off and drop the Hearthstead audit, she would retroactively remove your name from all the foundation documents. She said she could scrub the records. She said she knows a guy in IT who can alter the metadata. I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. She just admitted she has control over the records, I said. She just admitted she can manipulate the data. Exactly, Connor said. I told her that tampering with evidence during an active investigation is a federal crime. I told her she should probably save that IT guy's number for her defense attorney. She didn't like that. She started crying. She said I was ruining her life. She ruined her own life, I said. She just used my signature to do it. There is more, Connor said. She said something odd before she left. She said, it wasn't supposed to go this far. We were just supposed to hold the line until the big check cleared. The big check, I repeated. The grant from Dane's company. Right, Connor said. They were operating a Ponzi scheme. Mavissa. They were robbing Peter to pay Paul. And Dane was supposed to be the ultimate payout that settled all the debts. You didn't just crash a wedding, you crashed a solvency event. I hung up the phone and stared at the cease and desist letter. The war had shifted. It was no longer about the money they had stolen 9 years ago. It was about the narrative. They were trying to rewrite history to make me the villain. If they could paint me as the unstable, jealous sister who orchestrated a smear campaign, they could cast doubt on the evidence. They could claim the forged signatures were actually authorized by me during a period of mental instability. And now I was recanting out of spite. It was dirty, it was ugly, and it was exactly what I should have expected. An hour later, my email pinged. It was from Sarah Jenkins at Hearthstead, Mavissa, based on the preliminary findings and the counter-accusations we have received from the Vail legal team. We are moving to a formal deposition phase. We are convening a confrontation meeting tomorrow at 10 in the morning. We have summoned the officers of the Vail Pathways Foundation, the primary vendors, and you. We need to lock this down before they destroy any more records. Tomorrow. It was happening. I left work early. I needed to prepare. But as I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, with a Pennsylvania area code. I answered. Mavissa. It was my father. His voice was not the booming baritone of the disciplinarian I grew up with. It was lower, raspier. I have a lawyer. Warren, I said. You should be calling him. We do not need lawyers for this, Warren said. We are family. We can settle this like civilized people. You sent me a cease and desist letter threatening to sue me for defamation, I said. That does not feel very civilized. That was your mother's idea, Warren said quickly, throwing his wife under the bus without a second thought. She is panicking. Listen to me. Mavissa, I have a proposition. I am not interested. $40,000, Warren said. I stopped walking. I stood in the middle of the parking lot, my keys digging into my palm. What? I am prepared to offer you a settlement, Warren said. $40,000, cash, wired to your account tomorrow. In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement and a statement acknowledging that your involvement with the foundation was a misunderstanding. You say you forgot you signed the papers years ago. We walk away. Everyone is happy. $40,000. The number echoed in my head. It was not a random number. That is the exact amount of the loan, I said. The loan you took out in my name. The loan you used to send Bristol to Italy. It is a generous offer, Warren said. It clears the debt. You get a clean slate. We get a clean slate. You are not offering me money, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You are offering to pay off the debt you illegally accrued in my name, using money you probably stole from another donor, to buy my silence so you don't go to jail. It is restitution, Warren snapped, his patience fraying. Take the win, Mavissa. You want to be right, or you want to be free if this goes to court. It will drag on for years. We will drag your name through the mud. We will bring up everything. The nights you ran away, the attitude. We will make you look like a monster. You cannot make me look like anything, I said. The data speaks for itself. Take the money, Warren hissed. Do not be a fool. Bristol is suicidal. Your mother is on tranquilizers. Do you want their blood on your hands? I am not the one holding the knife. Dad, I said. You are. I hung up. I got into my car and slammed the door. The silence of the interior felt like a sanctuary. $40,000. They thought my integrity was worth exactly the price of the vacation they stole from me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dane. I found the emails between Bristol and her friends from 5 years ago. I was looking for the vendor contracts, but I found these instead. I think you need to know what they were saying about you. He attached a screenshot. It was a group chat. Bristol and 2 of her bridesmaids. Bristol, ugh. Dane asked about my sister again. He wanted to know why she isn't at Christmas. Friend 1. What did you tell him, Bristol? The usual. Told him she's off the grid again. Implied she's in a facility. He looked so sad for me. It works every time. If I tell him she's just a project manager in California, he might actually try to find her. Friend 2, LOL. You are terrible. But yeah. Better he thinks she's a junkie than he realizes your parents just hate her. Bristol, exactly. Plus, it explains why we can't reach her to sign the papers. She's not lucid. Dane, we have to handle it for her. He buys it. I stared at the screen. The tears did not come. I was past tears. I was in a place beyond sadness, a cold, hard landscape of absolute clarity. They had not just stolen my money, they had murdered my character. They had told the man who was supposed to be my brother-in-law that I was an addict in a facility. Just to cover up the fact that they were forging my signature, they had made me a ghost so they could rob my grave. I drove home. Connor was there, waiting with a glass of water and a printed timeline of events for tomorrow's meeting. Warren offered me $40,000, I told him, throwing my bag on the couch. To say I forgot I signed the papers, Connor nodded slowly. Of course he did. He is trying to close the position. He realizes the liability is greater than the settlement cost. And Dane sent me this, I said, showing him the text. Connor read it. His face hardened. That is malice, Connor said. That proves they knew what they were doing. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated, multi-year campaign to discredit you to prevent discovery. He looked at me. Tomorrow is going to be brutal, Connor said. They are going to lie. They are going to cry. They are going to try to trigger you. They know exactly which buttons to push because they installed them. I know, I said. You have a choice, Connor said. You can go in there and try to destroy them. You can scream. You can rage. You can burn the entire Vale legacy to the ground, and you would be justified. He paused. Or, he continued, you can do what you do for a living. You can be the project manager. You can present the data. You can let the facts be the violence. You do not need to raise your voice to send someone to prison. Mavissa, you just need to raise the evidence. I want them to hurt, I admitted. I want them to feel as small as I felt when I walked to that bus station. They will, Connor said. But let the system do it. If you lose control, they win. If you stay cold, they crumble. I went into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed. I pulled out my old phone, the one I had kept in a drawer for 9 years. It was cracked, the battery barely holding a charge. I plugged it in and waited for it to boot up. I navigated to the voice memos. There was one recording, dated 9 years ago, the night before I left. I pressed play. The audio was grainy, filled with static. My father's voice. We are not giving you a dime. You want a life. Go earn it. Be independent. Stop begging us for what you haven't worked for. My mother's voice. It is for your own good. Mavissa, you will thank us later. I listened to it. For years. I had listened to this recording as a source of pain. I listened to it to remind myself why I was angry. I listened to it to fuel my late nights at the office. But tonight, listening to it, I heard something different. I heard the voice of a man who was terrified of his own mediocrity, projecting it onto his child. I heard the voice of a woman who was so hollow she echoed whatever her husband said, and I heard the silence of the girl holding the phone. The girl who didn't say anything back, the girl who just took it. I am not that girl anymore, I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the phone. I did not delete the file. It was evidence, but I stopped the playback. I turned off the screen. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy. It was the silence of a gathered storm waiting to break. Tomorrow, I would walk into that conference room. I would not be the daughter. I would not be the sister. I would not be the victim. I would be the witness. And for the Vale family, that was the most dangerous thing I could possibly be. The conference room at Hearthstead Grant Works was silent, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the projector fan. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in a cool, artificial twilight. On one side of the mahogany table sat my parents in Bristol, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he charged by the minute and was currently regretting every second of it. On the other side sat Connor, myself, and Sarah Jenkins. Dane Ketterly sat at the far end of the table, alone. He was the neutral party, the bridge between the fraud and the discovery. He looked tired. His tuxedo was gone, replaced by a charcoal suit that seemed to swallow him whole. Sarah Jenkins did not waste time with pleasantries. She pressed a button on her laptop, and the screen behind her lit up. It was a spreadsheet. It was ugly, complex, and undeniable. "We are here to review the compliance audit of the Vale Pathways Foundation," Sarah said. Her voice was dry, devoid of emotion. "Specifically, we are looking at the disbursement of funds from the fiscal year ending in December." She clicked a remote. The slide changed. On the left side of the screen was an invoice from Lux Event Planning. It listed a deposit for a wedding reception at the Red Rock Sanctuary Resort. The amount was $12,500. On the right side of the screen was a withdrawal from the Vale Pathways Foundation bank account. The line item was labeled Student Housing Support Grant. The amount was exactly $12,500. The date was the same. "This is a coincidence," Warren said immediately. He adjusted his tie, his face slick with a sheen of sweat. "We disperse grants all the time. The amounts vary. You are cherry-picking data to fit a narrative." "Let us look at the next one," Sarah said, ignoring him. Click. Left side. An invoice for a custom-made bridal gown from a boutique in New York. Amount $8,200. Right side A withdrawal from the foundation. Label: Textbook and Educational Materials Assistance. Amount $8,200. "That is a lot of textbooks," Connor noted quietly. "Stop it," Bristol whispered. She was staring at the table, her hands gripping the edge so hard her knuckles were white. "Please, just stop." "We are not done," Sarah said. She pulled up a document scanned from the Foundation's archives. It was the annual report from 3 years ago. It featured a signature at the bottom. Mavissa Vale, Treasurer. Sarah then pulled up a notarized affidavit I had signed that morning. It was a sample of my actual signature. The two signatures looked nothing alike. The one on the Foundation document was loopy, florid, a child's idea of what an executive's signature should look like. My actual signature is sharp, jagged, and efficient. "I did not sign that," I said. My voice was calm. I did not feel the need to shout. The giant screen was shouting for me. "I was living in Oakland 3 years ago. I have passport stamps to prove I was out of the country on the date that document was allegedly signed in Pennsylvania." "It was a proxy," Lenora cried out. She reached for a tissue, dabbing at eyes that were dry. "Mavissa gave us verbal permission. We were just trying to streamline the paperwork. Families do this for each other. We were protecting her interests." "Protecting my interests by making me an accomplice to tax fraud?" I asked. "We were building a legacy." Warren slammed his hand on the table. "Everything we did, We did for the name, the Vale name, and this is how you repay us, by dragging us into a corporate tribunal. The data does not care about the Vale name. Mr. Vale, Sarah said. The data cares about the law. She turned to Dane. Mr. Ketterly, Sarah said. You work in risk assessment. You vetted the application for the Sterling grant. Based on what you see on this screen, would you approve funding for this organization? The room turned to Dane. My father looked at him with a desperate, threatening intensity. Bristol looked at him with terrified hope. Dane took a slow breath. He looked at the screen. He looked at the wedding invoice that matched the scholarship fund. No, Dane said. Dane, Bristol gasped. I confirmed the discrepancies 3 days before the wedding, Dane said, his voice steady but sad. I found the matching amounts. I found the emails from the treasurer account that originated from Bristol's IP address. I cannot approve funding, and I cannot proceed with any legal or personal merger with this entity. You are breaking up with me in a deposition, Bristol screamed. I am refusing to be an accessory after the fact, Dane said. I am sorry, Bristol, but I do not marry into fraud. It is not fraud, Lenora shrieked. It is accounting. It is creative accounting. We were going to pay it back. We just needed the bridge loan. The grant from Dane's company was going to cover the wedding expenses. And then we would have balanced the books. So you were running a Ponzi scheme, Connor said, using new grant money to pay off old theft. It is not theft if it stays in the family, Warren roared. Actually, Sarah Jenkins interrupted. That brings us to the final exhibit. She clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black for a second. Then a single bank statement appeared. It was not the foundation account. It was a personal checking account. We subpoenaed the downstream transfers, Sarah said. We wanted to see where the administrative fees were going. The foundation pays a monthly consulting fee of $3,000 to an entity called LV Lifestyle Management. Lenora went pale. She stopped breathing. We traced LV Lifestyle Management, Sarah said. It is a sole proprietorship registered to Lenora Vale. The bank account is a personal account. Sarah zoomed in on the expenditure column of Lenora's personal account. Neiman Marcus, the Ritz-Carlton Spa, Audi Financial Services. You are not just paying for Bristol's wedding, I said, realizing the true depth of the rot. You were paying for your car. You were paying for your clothes. You were using the charity money people gave to help kids to lease an Audi. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Warren turned to his wife. Lenora, you told me that money was for the overhead. I have expenses. Warren, Lenora stammered, her voice high and thin. I have to maintain an image. I cannot run a foundation looking like a pauper. I did it for us. You stole from the theft, I said. You were skimming off the top of your own scam. It was pathetic. It was not a grand conspiracy. It was just petty, banal greed. They were not evil geniuses. They were just people who felt they were too important to work for the things they wanted. This concludes our review, Sarah said, closing her laptop. Hearthstead Grantworks is immediately terminating all relationship with the Vale Pathways Foundation. We are freezing the pending grant. Furthermore, we are legally obligated to forward this file to the IRS and the State Attorney General's office for a criminal investigation regarding tax evasion and wire fraud. No, Bristol whispered. No, please, I cannot go to jail. I cannot. She looked at Warren. Daddy, do something. Warren did not look at her. He was staring at the screen, at the list of spa treatments paid for with scholarship money. He looked old. He looked defeated. I cannot do anything, Warren said softly. It is on paper. Bristol stood up. She looked at me. Her face was a mask of ruined mascara and raw terror. You did this, she hissed. You came back and you burned it all down. Are you happy? Are you happy that I have nothing? I have no husband. I have no money. I'm going to be a felon. Is that what you wanted? I looked at my sister. I looked at the woman who had mocked my independence, who had laughed at my struggle. I did not do this, Bristol, I said. I just turned on the lights. Bristol crumbled. She sank back into her chair and put her head in her hands. I was just doing what they told me, she sobbed. I was scared. I saw what they did to you. Mavisa, I saw how they cut you off. I didn't want to be you. I didn't want to be poor. I didn't want to be alone. I thought if I signed the papers, if I played the part, they would keep me safe. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly. I am not the golden child, Bristol whispered. I am the hostage. She was right. I had been the one who was banished. But she was the one who was imprisoned. They had fed her, clothed her, and spoiled her. But the price was her soul. They had made her too weak to leave, so she had no choice but to become their accomplice. I know, I said. I stood up. I walked over to where she was sitting. I did not hug her. That bridge was burned, but I stood close enough that she could hear me without me raising my voice. I am not going to ask for you to go to prison, I said. I am going to cooperate with the investigation, but I will tell them that you acted under duress and manipulation. It might help reduce your sentence. Bristol stared at me. Why? Because you are not my enemy, Bristol. I said, you never were. You were just another asset they liquidated. I turned to my parents. They could not meet my eyes. You said I should be independent, I said to them. You were right. It is the greatest gift you never meant to give me, because today I can walk out of this room, and you cannot. Let's go. Connor, I said. We walked out of the conference room. We walked down the long hallway, past the cubicles of people working honest jobs, past the reception desk. We pushed open the glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air in San Francisco was cool and crisp. It smelled of the ocean and exhaust fumes. To me, it smelled like oxygen. There was no applause. There was no confetti. Dane was probably inside giving a statement. My parents were probably calling a criminal defense attorney. Bristol was probably crying. But on the sidewalk, it was just quiet. Are you okay? Connor asked, taking my hand. Yes, I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. I feel light. What now? Connor asked. Now, I said. I make a phone call. I want to start a scholarship fund, a real one, with my own money, for kids who get kicked out of their homes because they want to study something their parents don't approve of, or for kids whose parents steal their futures. What will you call it? Connor asked. The Independent Grant, I said. And the first rule is no strings attached. I looked back at the building one last time. I saw the reflection of the city in the glass windows. I saw myself, for 9 years. Independent had been a word that meant abandoned. It meant hungry. It meant lonely. But as I squeezed my husband's hand and turned to walk toward the train station, I realized the definition had changed. Independent meant free. Independent meant clean. Independent meant that my name belonged to me, and no one else would ever sign it again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below with your location, and let's share our thoughts on this family drama. Don't forget to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.